Hey, 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 good morning. Center for Spiritual Living, Palm Desert, and friends all over our beautiful planet. It's great to be with you. My name is Charles Hall. I'm the Associate Minister at Center for Spiritual Living, Palm Desert. Most of you probably know that by now. And you know the guy that's sitting next to me. Are you there? Oh, other arm. Nope, can't.
One of these places. Here I
One
am.
of these places. Just down the 10, about half an hour maybe. Jeffon Seeley, I think you're getting used to us hanging out with you on Tuesdays. Tuesday morning for us, Tuesday at some time of the day, wherever you are. So grateful to be with you as we continue our exploration of how to be an anti-racist by Professor Ibram Kendi. Today we're on chapter 14, Gender.
Gender.
Which, based on the author's voice during this, is going to have you and I be in an interesting position to talk about gender as we move through this as two men. But you know what?
Yeah.
We're going to do it, and it's going to be lovely. And I think it makes it even more vitally important that we want to hear your voice today. So for those of you that are tuning in and listening live, Facebook, YouTube, please find that comment section. We'd love to hear from you to help stir our conversation. Inject yourself into our dialogue so that it become more robust, more meaningful. Jeffon, as usual, is going to take the lead with his slides. But as always, we want to hear from you to help spice things up and make this an hour that's even more powerful than it's already going to be. Right, my brother?
Yeah, that is accurate and true. And
How are
as I'm doing good, it's another good day. It's something that I want to kind of point out, aside from saying, hello and welcome to everybody who's out there. And I hope that you've had the willingness to embrace a handful of breaths this morning or where this afternoon, this day, a few heartbeats, and recognizing the life that is flowing through you. And as we go through this conversation, recognizing that we're continuously revealing areas or parts within ourselves that we can move towards greater expansion, clarity, and ultimately this concept of being an anti-racist. And Rev Charles, something that you mentioned in this particular chapter, it's about gender racism. And obviously as two men and having this conversation, circling in another voice would have been extremely helpful. But there's one point that's imperative for us to understand, and that is there are going to be times when we're reading chapters of books or entire books or little passages that do not necessarily relate to us from an experiential standpoint, as in, we have our own certain experience and understanding and perspective. How can we still venture into the woods, so to say, hopefully to reveal something when there may not be another person next to you who you can have a conversation with? But having this courage and confidence to do this self-exploration around concepts that only you can work through, but then obviously being around individuals where you can continuously deepen this conversation. And I just kind of want to preface this conversation in that way, because obviously it would be very valuable to have another perspective, but there is a lot of value to be gained, even just from our conversation or the comments that we receive from the listeners as well.
a great point. I agree with you 100%. Sometimes to that point, Jeffon, I if I'm not with somebody else to rub ideas against, I actually create an antagonist and a protagonist in my own mind so that I can kind of create a friction there to work it out. And the idea of a protagonist and antagonist is to make sure that that I'm doing my best to objectify the conversation because it's still happening inside of me. You know what I'm saying? To create another character as much as I possibly can that's interacting with me, to create that rub and that friction that creates friction in a good way, that creates something new, so that's a great point, Jeffon. I'm grateful you brought that up.
Yeah, in this chapter specifically, as with many chapters, has really prompted some things that I have been in my mind, but I haven't really explored. And so I'm really interested to having this conversation here today and seeing what more is revealed as we go through it.
Excellent. And a reminder, Help us create the conversation, gang. For those of you
Please.
that are tuning in, as Jeffon's going to take the lead here, we'll get into it. If something sparks you, please weigh in. Please, we'd love that. So,
yes.
Jeffon, my brother, let's rock and roll. Here we go.
All right. With that being said, I shared my screen. Are you able to? There we go. Perfect. So, chapter 14. Incredible. This is 14 weeks of this book that is continuously allowing us to do some inner exploration. So, as always, starting off with 2 definitions as to what we'll be talking about. First and foremost, gender racism is a powerful collection of racist policies that lead to inequity between race genders and are substantiated by racist ideas about race genders. Again, that's a lot of words that kind of become real as we go through the conversation. Gender anti-racism, a powerful collection of anti-racist policies that lead to equity between race genders and are substantiated by anti-racist ideas about race genders. So as always, I mean, starting off with these definitions, you kind of, at least for me, I'm like, all right, well, what are we going to get into? And he pulls back the curtain in a little bit more of an experiential standpoint there. Yep. Anything you want to add to it, Rev Charles?
Not yet.
No. Okay, moving right along. This is a point that is extremely important for me and something that I had to actually come face to face with in my experience, particularly when I was at the Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. There was, and as he puts it, on the bottom of page 182, he said he arrived at Temple, the university that he was going to, as a racist, sexist, homophobe. Not exactly friend material for the women that he was expressing, who were very strong, outspoken young women in the particular Black space.
Intelligent.
Yes, extremely intelligent. So my ideas of gender and sexuality reflected those of my parents. They did not raise me to be a homophobe. They rarely talked about gay and lesbian people. Ideas often dance a cappella. Their silence erased queer existence as thoroughly as integrationists erased the reality of integrated white spaces. And so I just wanted to put that there because that is something that I know in my conversations with Dr. Joe, with some of my mentors, I know Dr. David Alt, and recognizing how my silence or being willing to venture into environments that are not necessarily, I wasn't brought up around them. In the LGBTQ space, up until I became a real devout member of Center for Spiritual Living, that was just something that I didn't have an experience with. And so that particular point was important for me to highlight. And how, and I don't want to say ignorant, but it was a sense of ignorance for me to not venture into those spaces or to have these preconceived ideas about what that space is without actually experiencing it on a human to human level with somebody. And that particular point that he highlighted there, just like it revealed itself from the page, so to say.
Yeah, I love it too, Jeffon. Great point. The word that comes to me is ignorance, whether it's willful ignorance or just ignorance by the absence of something. Again, ideas, their silence erase this existence. So it's like it wasn't even, and it's actually in our education system happening a lot too. There's certain aspects of our education that aren't present anymore. Like, from my understanding, well, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but presencing things in a life-giving way gives them life.
Yeah.
At least we can talk about it. Be exposed to it. Exposure is such a powerful thing. And that's what I took away from that. And when we don't have exposure, or we're not learning about something, we have ignorance.
Yeah.
And ignorance isn't necessarily a bad thing. Bad demonstrations of behavior can come out of it, but we're called to just be exposed. So I love that as well.
Yeah. And I mean, it goes right along with the point of individuals who haven't spent time in Black spaces, individuals who haven't spent time in Latinx spaces or Asian spaces, LGBTQ spaces, white spaces. And I think I've mentioned in the past friends who, in some of my friends down in the South who they don't feel comfortable in white spaces. Some of my friends in North Dakota don't feel comfortable in Black spaces. When I was younger, I didn't necessarily feel comfortable in certain spaces, but a willingness to go into that and recognize the principle of it all, the divinity that is flowing through all the people, regardless of the particular space, color, shade, belief, sexual orientation, gender identification, any of those things that we perceive separates us. And how can we begin to get to the foundational level? And Rev Lori and I had a conversation about this, of the infinite that is there. So anyways, I'm not saying anything you don't already know.
No. It's but maybe the folks, your friends from down south and the friends from up north can meet, like in Colorado
In the middle.
or Nebraska or someplace.
Yeah, right. We'll meet in Iowa,
Let's say that. And have a big party and start to expose ourselves to each other.
Yeah, and it's the same with my friends on the reservations too. I mean, there's this a lot of them have this idea of being fearful to venture into a city. And then there's people who I know in cities or urban centers or even rural areas who they do not want to venture into the reservation because of these preconceived notions that are not based in any reality. It's based in the opinions or beliefs about a particular group of people that are, create that level of ignorance that then we can exacerbate or promote or exponentially grow one way or another. So 10 minutes into this first page, I think it's time to go to the next slide. So sexist ideas. This is something that I also think that here in America we often do. And being a man, I can kind of share a few things that aligned with me. But he was talking about his mother and father on page 183. And dad's sexist ideas demanded he lead, and Ma's sexist ideas that she submitted. My parents did not strictly raise me to be a Black patriarch. I became a Black patriarch because my parents and the world around me did not strictly raise me to be a Black feminist.
Mm.
And I don't think that I feminism and feminist ideas, that was not something that was in my reality until I was willing to venture towards it, which then was unknown in a way that then at least started shaking the foundation that I built my reality upon, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
I was raised by women, basically, but in so many different ways, so many different environments. Part of my struggle was actually to really identify with my masculinity. And that whenever, even when I went from my grade school to an all boys, Catholic high school, where everything was about competition. It was, and competition isn't, that's not masculine or feminine, but within a masculine setting of all boys. And that heightened, intense competition made me feel like an outcast. I struggled through high school because of that. Because I was always been in touch with that, that more feminine aspect of myself, if you will, always just craving. My dad wasn't around much to teach me really anything except absence. He taught me absence.
Mm-hmm.
So that was an interesting struggle of mine too, and then really craving those times of. Joke around. I say sometimes, we're going to go do things men do. Do things, whatever the things men do, but to actually create those times of having that. So it was an interesting walk for me to crave those things, and comes out of such a loving, amazing, feminine environment, really.
Yeah. Huh. That's so fascinating. Yeah, it's this work of self-exploration and inner introspection, becoming an astronaut of inner space, is a lifelong process. And it's so fascinating when we reflect back at our experience and see things that we've assembled or carried with us, and often mismanaging memories to reinforce things that allow us to miss the mark, and other things that reinforce more of who and what we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right
So I will continue on, because at this pace we might be here till 4 p.m.
Oh.
So on the bottom of page 183, he begins talking about this particular thought that Black families were headed by women, twice the rate for white families. And he's kind of bringing in this point that he'll start to dissolve as we move forward, but ultimately saying that the man needs to step up a little bit more, and focusing more so on the Black male than the Black female, which is racism and sexism kind of intertwined amongst itself. And he goes into a particular passage in here. I'll pull this up here for us. So for too many Black men, and this is kind of the point that he's getting at, it became a struggle against white men for the power, for Black power over Black women.
Mm.
And so what it really started highlighting is this interracial force policing or policing the sexuality of young Black mothers, ultimately emphasizing this idea of single parent households. The reason for that, blaming the welfare system, blaming sexual irresponsibility, disconnecting the please say that for me, Rev Charles.
Premarital abstinence.
Yep,
Premarital abstinence
of Christ.
Yep.
Yes, and in this particular conversation, he's talking about the way in which his father kind of stood up in the face of this.
Yes.
In seeing the disrespect that women, all types, often face, I think that is something that I saw face, firsthand when I was young. My mom and her very toxic relationships, and seeing her with black eyes and all this stuff, that really struck a chord at a very young age of this idea of just deep respect for women. And he kind of goes through a little saying with his father there, when he's seeing somebody beating his girlfriend, or when he was at a Nation of Islam thing, and his girlfriend at the time spoke up, and the minister slapped her in the mouth, and his dad stood up almost ready to fight him and had to be escorted out. And there's this I'm kind of saying a lot, and I don't know if I'm making sense as I'm having these conversations. I'm more so kind of speaking through some ideas myself, but it seems as if in America, women have always been put on the back burner. And of all women, it seems as if the Black women or Black woman has been continuously downtrodden. And even so much so, when suffrage and all those type of things with white women's rights almost was void of Black women's rights. And then on top of that, in the Black community, at times, the Black male, somewhat, just seeing the way in which women have been oppressed in that sense as well. So I'm just kind of sharing a variety of things, Rev Charles.
Keep sharing, because my daughter's about to ask me a question. Speaking
Yeah.
of powerful
Yes. Perfect. So with that being said, and to everybody who's listening right now, I'm just kind of talking through some things from my perspective. And I'm sure that we all have a story. We all could sit down and have a conversation as to how some of these points may have struck a chord with us, how some of them may have been completely foreign to us. But I'm just kind of sharing some things to pull back the curtain on my understanding. And hopefully in doing so, you might glean some understanding into the thought processes that are running through your mind. And or if not, that comment section is always open, and you can share some ideas that can help me shift my perspective in ways that only you can help me do, if that makes sense.
Because we're each unique voice, and unique voices coming together creates the soup of life.
Yes.
The stew.
The stew. The
thanks
stew.
For
the
the
stew.
Thanks for the allowing me to interrupt so gracefully, or
Yes.
Got it. You know what? I think that's a case in point. A moment though is when my daughter comes in here, I want to dignify her presence,
Of course.
which is going to inform her life going forward as well. Not to be a silent voice or shunned or shamed, but she's got a pressing school issue that she needs to work out, So I just think that's a moment, and I'm not tooting my own horn or patting my own back. It's just a moment of how we can continue to change the arc of dignifying every human being and our women and women.
Yeah, yeah, and it's great that the whole virtual thing has changed the stigma. If somebody does something in the background, as if that suddenly is derailing or not as professional, when it's really like, no, I think last time somebody knocked at the door,
Yeah, you
and I
got
went
a
and
package.
I got a package, special order. But yeah, it's so true. It's children deserve attention, respect, in the same way that if a boss walked into the door or somebody who we work with, we would honor and at least see them and acknowledge them.
Yep.
So I'm with you there, Rev Charles.
All right. Thank you, brother.
Anything
Children
you want?
are not our future. They exist right now. They're happening.
They're happening. That is accurate.
They're there. There they are.
So one point that I want to touch upon, and then I'm going to pause for a moment and see if you have anything you want to share, is this whole concept of obey on the top of page 186 that I really liked when his parents were getting married.
That's a funny interaction, isn't it? I love it.
Yes. Husbands, love your wives, and wives, obey your husbands. To which his mom said, I'm not obeying him. The only man I obeyed was my father when I was a child. And then she said to his dad, you are not my father and I am not your child. Then they came to the consensus or conclusion. How about, are we willing to submit to one another?
Submit one to another.
Submit one to another.
Yep.
And that's another thing that I think has just been parked in our psyche, so to say, of this concept of obey, that the head of the household and all of these things. And through that concept, she went through a process of rethinking her own Christian sexism that is, very apparent when you kind of start diving into some of the texts and philosophies.
Yep.
So nevertheless.
Yeah, I love that interaction too. I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
I can almost hear a voice though. I'm not obeying him.
Right. So in this whole concept then, so Black feminists fought sexism in Black spaces and racism in women's spaces. And then he goes on to say that Black queer activists too had been marginalized after they launched the gay liberation movement through Stonewall Rebellion in Manhattan. Braving homophobia in Black spaces and racism in queer spaces, anti-racist queer people formed their own spaces, to which these two kind of circles or spaces began to merge in a certain way. And they started to form collective spaces where they could have these things. One of which was this, I don't know how to pronounce it specifically, but Combahee River Collective, which embodied this queer liberation, feminism, anti-racism, like perhaps no other public statement in American history. They want to be recognized as human, levelly human, and ultimately recognizing that they are enough. To which I would say that those are concepts that we hear sprinkled throughout New Thought, CSL, Science of Mind continuously.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that, to be recognized as human, levelly human.
Levelly human.
And then I know he gets into pay equity and things later, but it's the same idea. It's just, it's waking up, wake up. We're human beings. Yeah.
So this is a kind of going off a little tangent. This may be something that we can do internally, but in what ways have we either seen ourselves as not equal? And what ways have we treated people or groups of people or even thought about people in ways that created this unequal type ground?
Mm-hmm.
And I will ask you, Rev Charles, what do you think are some particular things that we could embrace from principle standpoint to catch ourselves when we start participating in that, I'll almost say an unconscious fog that allows that to continue forward? What are some things that we can do to catch ourselves, bring ourselves back to center, and then move forward in a more equal and compassionate way.
An understanding of our oneness, more specifically, that the dignity of all life. That when we, I'll give you a personal example that really got me this week. I had an altercation with somebody who called me a name based on behavior they thought I was doing. And this wasn't white, black, and it was white male and white male.
Mm-hmm.
And this person called me a name, and it did something inside of me. Normally, I'm fairly as I'm passionate as I am. I'm fairly my gasket. I make sure that my gasket doesn't ever blow, because I think that's something I'm supposed to keep keep in check. Somehow my gasket blew, and I got into it with this guy. And we got into this, I was like, you can't just come call me a name and then walk away. Anyway, it was, and my family was around, and I wasn't in principle at all. I was in proving I'm right. That's exactly where I went to. And here's what happened. I got so fired up that I just had to extract myself from the situation. After doing this for maybe 5 minutes, I was so wanting to be right and lost in the moment that I was aware I was so angry. And here's what happened is it churned up all sorts of stuff, accumulated unhealed stuff from my life. I mean, it just, that in that one moment, it churned it all up. And so I just had to, I could have gone on forever. I was like, Charles, you just got to get out of here. And what I did is we were at a family gathering, swimming in the pool, and I left. And the entire way home, I cried hard, like harder than I've cried in a long time, because I knew I wasn't in my right heart, and I wasn't in my right mind. And I cried. And this is just a few days ago. I mean, like a sobbing cry. Because I didn't use the faculty that I normally have, which is what you're asking me, in that moment at all, to maintain center. It was actually, Jeffon, what it was a moment of, I mentioned earlier that I one of the struggles for me was to kind of find the more masculine aspects of me. It seemed like a moment when I blew my gasket, that it was a moment for me to show how masculine I can be. As funny as it sounds, grown man, here I am, lost it. Anyway, so I'm sharing that as kind of an anti-answer to your question, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
What in the time of reflection, when I was crying as hard as I was crying, God, this is on Facebook and YouTube and everywhere, isn't it?
Hey, it's okay. I mean, look, if there's someone out there who does not think that we've experienced something like that, I mean, it's a human thing that I know I've experienced.
Yeah, the thing is, it hurt my heart because I was so out of principle. So what it reminded me of is this: I'm a human being figuring things out. That guy is a human being figuring things out, and we all bring what we bring into the moment. But I told my daughter, I went to her the next morning and I said, "Love, Daddy did not. That was not an example of life-giving, powerful behavior." And I'm sorry for leaving you in that moment, but I just had to get away. And I promise that I will do my absolute best to just be in my heart more. I can't remember exactly the words I said. And she just goes, and I said, "Do you understand?" She goes, "Yeah." She goes, "Daddy, why couldn't you just have said," or she said, "You could have just said, that's not what I meant to say," and then just kind of left it alone. And I was like, "You're right. That's next time. That's what I should do, is just cut to the heart of the matter." That was a powerful moment. I'm rambling on now, but anyway, the reflection is, we're all human beings doing our thing.
Yeah.
And to remember that. And so if I get caught up in thinking I'm better than, or the homeless guy, or the person that's, not treating somebody else well, if I'm not treating somebody else well, there has to be a mechanism somehow inside that just says, we're all here doing our best, our thing. We're doing our thing. And let me just be reminded of that right now. That's why my heart hurts so much, because I know that truth and I was outside of it. So
yeah, that's such a great point. And there's a thing, that which I dislike in another is often unresolved issue that's festering within myself.
That's what happened. I knew it coming home, and that's why I cried so hard too. I was like, man, Charles, you have got to heal this stuff. That's another part of it. That's a great point.
So you know, kind of taking that just one step, and then I'll get back to the sides. Because I've noticed really there's two sides when we have this conversation about racism, even sexism, these very two polarizing type points, right? There is a lot of individuals who are very open and receptive and want to have a conversation that is challenging in nature, that may reveal a area or areas that they can grow. I know it's been very true for me. But then there's also a group or people, I won't put them in a group. There are also people who they do not want to talk about this at all. Mm-hmm. And when you bring up a point about racism or about unconscious perceptions that continue to perpetuate inequity, or sexism, the ways in which women are treated different, and then you look at the race within the gender racism as we're talking, and we start seeing that, and people will just completely put their blinders on. And I guess what I'm kind of getting at is, imagine it first takes a little bit of courage within yourself. And secondly, it may also, I guess what I'm trying to say is, there may be something that is unresolved within ourselves that is preventing us from actually seeing anything that we can capture other than the small little bit of perspective that we deem to be true. Great point. If we are standing upon a principle of science of mind or new thought or the oneness of all, then anything that prevents us from seeing that oneness or that all, which could be racism, which could be sexism, which could be homophobia, which could be all of those things, we have to find as humans a way to resolve that in order to actually be able to declare that oneness is what we are practicing and participating in.
Yep. And that takes, we have to become responsible. Each of us have to become extraordinarily responsible for our own lives. Like when you mentioned someone else isn't willing to look at it, I think someone else begins willing to look at it if I take the first step forward, taking responsibility for my unhealed stuff, the places where I'm unhealed. Like, you remember that story when I shared I was at that Ice-T show, and I was standing next to that tall black dude, and I said, "What, you know, whatever." We look, you know, whatever we had. And I said, "What, do you have a problem with white people?" Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's all projection, right? This is when I was 22, 23 years old. That's why I went home that night and cried my eyes out, like, what? Because my heart hurt, because I was so far outside of myself. I was obviously, who's got the problem here? Charles Hall has the problem here.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I think we just got to start really, really being extraordinarily responsible.
Yeah. Jeff said, I want to always be open and receptive to another point of view. Your weekly book study has expanded my vision. Not always the stretch has been comfortable. Thank you. Yeah. I'm continuing to stretch. And I think that if we are infinite in nature, then it is a continuous expansion that is never ending. And to say that you've made it, or look, I've reached infinite. That is yeah. I don't need to expand anymore, Rev Charles. Trust me.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, we're good. What is this? How do you suggest being able to break these barriers between the receptive and non-receptive, or is it best to walk away? I think you got to feel into the moment, first of all. I mean, if it's going to be too combative, I would walk away. But also, again, like I just said, if I can take responsibility for the places where I'm not healed and put my foot forward first, I've always found that it opens the other person up. It creates a safety. You know, if I'm willing to be vulnerable, it automatically creates this safe spot for, oh, well, I can tell the truth about my life too.
Yeah. And I found that usually when I am non-receptive, or when I am things are escalating into some type of conflict, whether it's a verbal or just even emotional conflict, it is almost 100% due to the fact that I'm not in the present. If I am really present with myself and my thoughts and my emotions and the choices that I'm making and the actions that I'm committing to at that moment, simply by recognizing breath or my heart or any of those things that can center me in the now, I am at a much better place to first, because I've at least captured some type of peace internally. And then I can, even if I totally disagree with somebody, I'm in a better place, it seems. And when I'm not present, I mean, things can spiral out of control very quickly.
Very quickly.
Yes.
How many do we have? Some more slides to get to?
Yeah, just three more.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So moving right along here, on the top of page 188 or bottom of page 188, 189, he has a few things that really begin to drill into this gender racism that he's been discussing. Sexism and racism intertwine and combine under certain conditions into one hybrid phenomenon. And on the bottom of page 188, he's racist and sexist power distinguishes racial or gender groups at the intersection of race and gender. To be anti-racist is to reject not only the hierarchy of races, but of race genders. To be feminist is to reject not only the hierarchy of genders, but race genders. To be truly anti-racist is to be feminist. To be truly feminist is to be anti-racist. To be anti-racist and feminist is to level the different race genders, is to root the inequities between equal race genders and the policies of gender racism. I would just recommend that you read that chapter, because what I just said there, just kind of is bouncing all over the place. But I thought that really captured the essence of what he's trying to get at in this particular chapter. So when we say, well, what is gender racism, Jeffon and Rev Charles? I mean, what are you guys talking about? Well, in the book, as he often does, he highlights some particular examples. In the 70s and 80s, one way that gender racism was highlighted, or we can see that, is involuntary sterilizations of Black women. 200,000 in 1970, 700,000 in 1980s. I mean, just think of that for a moment. Sterilizing Black women without them even knowing that they are being sterilized. Another example, Black women with some collegiate education, on average, well, in this particular example, make less than white women with only high school degrees. Another example of gender racism, median wealth for a single white woman is $42,000 compared to $100 for a single Black woman. Another one that my wife always talks about, and a big reason why she's wants to work with women, particularly women of color, is the pregnancy-related deaths. And in this particular example here, he's saying are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes. And then the final point, a Black woman with an advanced degree is more likely to lose her baby than a white woman with less than an 8th grade education. And then Black women remain twice as likely to be incarcerated as white women. So he's really beginning to pull back the curtain around the racist policies or racist things that are continuing to perpetuate this inequity that we are seeing that can be measured. It's not just some random ideas pulling it from thin air. These things are measurable, and these are just some of the examples. I'm sure that we could continue to dive into even more.
Yep.
Anything you want to add there, Rev Charles?
No.
It's a heavy
saying
thing.
it out. It's astonishing. I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna share these this slide, and then I have a few takeaways for us all to kind of walk away with, and then we can touch upon anything else. I know we have about 20 minutes left, so.
Cool.
So this is this is where I would love to have some multiple perspectives on this particular topic that he's touching upon on page 190, bottom of 189. he said, white women's resistance to black feminism is an intersectional theory. As an intersectional theory has been self-destructive in preventing resistors from understanding their own oppression. And he says the same thing about males. And this is where I kind of would like to have a conversation with how someone else may interpret this. But I do know that he was saying that, to give an example, the opposite of gender racism, the unvirtuous hypersexual black woman is the virtuous asexual white woman. And then taking it a step further, white male interest in lynching black male rapists of white women was as much about controlling the sexuality of white women as it was about controlling the sexuality of black men. And then all at the same time, as racist white and black men were raping black women. That was something that I know throughout the history of this country is a very sensitive, tragic, horrible, horrific thing that people often just completely ignore. And I think that he says the black woman at that time is the slave, which is a very, that is a deep sentence there.
Didn't he go back to before to tee that up too? Was that there earlier in the? Yeah, on page 184. Did we already talk about this? He said that an America of integrated white spaces had not been achieved because at racism's core was the sexual rejection of the racial minority, the conscious attempt on the part of the majority to prevent interracial cohabitation. The white man's sexual jealousy of the black man was the key. Feeding into this whole idea. What was your question? Did you have a question, or what are we? Or we're just talking?
That's just talking, because I read that particular portion a handful of times, and I kind of get the gist of what he's getting at. But I mean, this is where it's beneficial to have other perspectives kind of chiming in. You know what I mean?
I do.
So,
who's out there?
Jeff is out there. He is saying, could being a listener be the pathway? I think that he's still talking about the dissolving the barriers that exist out there.
Well, listening certainly is. Listening's a good thing. Absolutely. It's a pathway.
A pathway. So the final point that I'll share here before I kind of touch upon a few takeaways. And I'm not going to say anything that we haven't already discussed. We do know that he says that no defense is stronger than the frail tears in the innocent. So let's just think for a moment. The ways in which in our judicial system, certain people of color and white people, let's just say white women, that's what he's kind of getting at in this particular point of this chapter, have been classified by the courts. Okay, so that's where he's kind of going. No defense is stronger than the frail tears of innocent white womanhood. Just think about that for a moment. No persecution is stronger than the case for the inherently guilty black manhood. And we see that, couple it together, these ideas of gender racism transform every innocent black male into a criminal, and every white female criminal into Casey Anthony, which I think we know that. Women get away with murder and black men spend years in prison for wrongful convictions. And we saw that. I mean, one of the recent, I guess it was a few years back, was that the college athlete who was wrongfully convicted of rape spent, I think he got sentenced to 5 to 7 years in prison. And no evidence because he was innocent. He's since been released. And then a young white man in Harvard was caught actually sexually assaulting a girl or a woman and didn't get any time. Just got, I think, 6 or maybe 12 months of probation. And we see the ways in which these things are tilted. And we go back to Emmett Till. If we remember his story, a 15-year-old African-American boy walking down the street. A white woman at that time said that he whistled at her. And what happened is a mob gathered, went and got him, beat him, lynched him, threw him in the river. And you can go online and look at the pictures of what they did to this boy, to which no convictions happened. Not to the wrongful accuser, and not to the people who lynched and did all that stuff to him. Now, later, they're talking about bringing up the case, but many of the people have since passed. And we see this. It's a tragic thing that then is emphasized by, after imprisonment of black men dropped 26% between 2000 and 2015. Black men were still nearly 6 times more likely than white men, 25 times more likely than black women, and 50 times more likely than white women to be incarcerated. So we just see that these are continuing to perpetuate. I'm sure that many of you who are listening out there are saying, Jeffon, okay, I think that this is something that we've heard time and time again. What can we do about it? One thing that we can do, as Rev Charles and I often say, is to be willing to stand behind principle and to be willing to venture into those unknown spaces within our mind that may perpetuate, or we don't even know are participating in keeping these things in place. Jeff said, so one thing we can do is to help see all black people as human beings and not categorized as they have been defined or as you have been defined. Of course, human beings having a spiritual experience. And one human being is not in this group sense that we say all people within this group or look this way, act in this fashion, but being willing to authentically engage with one another in such a way that we start dissolving those barriers that we've been talking about that seem to continue to push these policies and ideas that bridge this separation from us on a human level.
Yeah. And that's why I love the idea that he, and I say this, I feel like every week comes back to the individual level as well. Disintegrating the idea that just because somebody's white or somebody's black, that they get treated this way just because of that, rather than who that person is, that human being, that one person. Deconstructing that is part of what we're up to right now, deconstructing that whole idea. And this book is littered with those ideas throughout here. So yeah.
And it's for anybody out there who's thinking, and I don't know if there is, but okay, we've been talking about this. Dr. Joe and I sat down right after George Floyd, and people who are thinking, how long are they going to continue to talk about this? How long? And it's really, how long can we continue to not talk about this?
That's right.
And realistically, I would dare to say, in spiritual communities, this concept of equality, of human equality, should be talked about just as much as affirmative prayer or as the principles that we stand behind. Because if we as humans are not aware of the ways in which we are not creating a world that works for everybody, how can we actually expect to move forward and create a world that works for everybody? So hiding or refusing or ignoring or not looking at these particular things that continue to fuel this division tends to be the very things that are taking us away or missing the mark in creating that world that many of us at CSL or New Thought tradition, when we talk about a world that works for everybody, we have to recognize the role that we play. And ignoring, avoiding, or denying is actually fanning the flames that we are trying to rise above.
Fanning the flame, which he speaks to as well. Back to one of your first points, Jeffon, of it was that his parents it was in the silence that he became homophobic, essentially, right?
Right. Yep.
Because it wasn't addressed. I mean, it's like affirmatively and go on offense, if you will. Go on offense with addressing the vast variety of life and how beautiful it is. How many different types of people they are, how they express themselves, who they love, why it's okay, all of these types of things. It takes the taboo off of anything. It peels it back so we can actually look at it, embrace it, appreciate it.
Yeah. Jeff said, in the spirit of science and mind, we see things as a healed condition. Can you help discuss what this looks like?
One more time, Jeffon, would you say it again?
In the spirit of science of mind, we see things as a healed condition. Can you help discuss what this looks like?
Well, what we want to do is move our consciousness, our awareness into a standpoint of wholeness. That's what we're seeking to do. So it's not, I mean, we're almost living in both worlds, understanding that there's a oneness principle going on, but not pretending that the stuff that he's writing about and some of the news stories we see, white, black, Latin, whatever, Asian, isn't happening. But again, we want to get our mind and our heart right to see that when we can identify a travesty, that within our own consciousness, we're welcoming it through the doorway of healing into wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
That we're actually a participant in the solution of it because we stand in the quote unquote finished kingdom of heaven.
Right.
And from there, we kind of are dispatched to identifying where there's a lack of integrity with that idea to reveal wholeness.
Yeah, that's such a great point. If we think of the affirmative prayer and you know, we stand behind the there's one power presence that is flowing through all things. It is that which holds the earth in space. It is that which enables the sun to shine down upon this planet. It's that which is enabling the earth to spin, recognizing the oneness that we have with this power. And then recognizing that it's not just the oneness that we share, but that all shares with this one essence, this one energy, this infinite intelligence, and recognizing that we are guided and led to begin to create more of this realization of oneness, of compassion, of harmony, of peace, and then releasing gratitude, acting as if it is already accomplished, and then showing up every day with this inner knowing that we are guided, directed, and led to those things that continue to create that which we inwardly have already seen.
That's it.
One last thing, Jeff said, if we are to act as if, then do we let go of the non-healed condition and then as an individual walk in that space?
Well,
so
we're called to walk in that space, but also not to pretend it's not happening. I mean, look, if I walk outside and I see somebody getting their ass kicked, am I just going to walk by and like, oh, that's not happening? That's irresponsible. If there's something I can do, if I see a parent beating their kid in the grocery store, a defenseless child, am I just going to walk by? Oh, that's not happening. I live in the finished kingdom of heaven and all is well. It's ridiculous. I'm going to do what I can do. It's from the standpoint of understanding that that isn't okay, that isn't right, that is outside of principle, that is outside of how things are quote unquote supposed to be. It's from that standpoint that I'm called to act. Look, we're human beings. We're human having an experience here. And we are our brother's keeper. I am my sister's keeper. And if there's an injustice happening, I got to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think kind of to Jeff's point, that idea of acting as if and then letting go of the non-healed condition, this process of spiritual bypassing, which is a often thing that I know I've embraced, where, well, that's not really happening. I know what's really there. It's this sense of oneness. But that does not dismiss or discount the actual suffering or struggling that somebody who we are sharing this planet with is experiencing. And so perhaps from an enlightened state, or not enlightened, but from this higher place of consciousness, I can begin to recognize that I can use my life in such a way that I can help to bring more peace, not only just to myself, but to the people that I am around.
Absolutely. And it makes me think of Dr. King's when he unpacked the story of the Good Samaritan in a different way in one of his last sermons. I think his very last sermon the day before he passed. He said that the Good Samaritan turned the whole idea around. Well, everybody else was like, if I go over there, what's going to happen to me? If I go help this guy, what's going to happen to me? Dr. King said, no, we got to flip this whole thing around. The Good Samaritan said, if I don't go over there, what's going to happen to them? And that's action. So it's moving from this selfish standpoint into well, if I don't get involved, what's going to happen to them? That's compassion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Adair said, is what you have described as what we can do, the what that the author of the book is indicating? the author hasn't necessarily put is this what that which Black readers can take from this book?
Is what's the this? Is this
Yeah, is this what that we're talking about, like what you can do?
Mm.
So I'll say there, what I have done is I've just, in reading this, I've found certain things that I feel that I can move towards and actually put into motion. At the end of these chapters, he doesn't have any particular takeaways that you need to go do. He's more so pulling back the veil or the curtain, so to say, as to the intricate workings and ways in which we participate in either racist or anti-racist behaviors as he's going through the particular chapters.
Yeah, I think it's for each to answer for another. I think it becomes dangerous a little bit. I think each of us are meant to take away what we're called to take away from it.
Yeah.
What speaks to your heart and to your mind and to your soul for where you are right now in life. What are your individual takeaways, which is so beautiful about this, and so many different perspectives, that each one of us are going to have a different takeaway, and what is ours to do.
Yeah.
Which I love that about the variety of each of our stories and how we're continuing to write our story.
Right. And by no means, though I'm biracial and half Black, do I speak for this is what Black people need to do. These are just things that resonate with my spirit that I am going to move forward, and then I put them together in a few points that I'll share with you now that seem to make sense for me. They do not have to make sense for you, but they make sense to me.
And this segment is called Jeffon's Takeaways.
Yeah, here we go.
I feel like I want to have like a little hype segment.
Grab your notebook, take some mental pictures. So we kind of talked about this. Consciously catch yourself when you are silent about or around matters that prevent peace and compassion for all. That's a practice that you can do. We all can catch ourselves when we are participating in something that is not creating peace and compassion for everybody. Pause periodically and recognize where and to what you are directing your energy towards. Our energy is flowing somewhere each and every day, each moment of each day. Are we truly aware of how we are using our energy to assist in creating our individual and collective realities? Meditate and reflect on the most challenging concepts from this chapter. So if you heard something that didn't strike a chord with you, or you're saying, well, let me go into that a little bit more, I didn't quite understand, spend some time with that. Continue to sharpen the saw, so to say. Each evening, ask yourself, what ways did I act anti-racist? In what ways did I not? This is something that will allow us to continue to recognize that we are on this never-ending unfoldment process where we can continue to get better. And then finally, probably the most important, know that the divine shines and illuminates through all.
Yes.
That final point, if we are truly able to embody that consciously, spiritually, at the deepest level of our being, the ones that I mentioned above will be almost null and void. And that's the principle that I'm going to try to stand on as I go throughout this week. So those are a few ideas that perhaps may align with you. And if one of them does, I would encourage you just to move forward with that.
Love it. Thank you, Jeffon. Love the takeaways, love the slides, love the discussion. I appreciate you. Another great week. I'm grateful. Good stuff.
Thank you, Charles.
Yeah.
And I want to say thank you to everybody who's been listening to us. And I know sometimes we're fumbling around. I don't know if anybody watches football, but it's like the ball's bouncing all over. We're trying to retrieve the fumble. But I appreciate everybody who has been chiming in and sharing comments and reading along with us. And whether you listen live or later, it does not matter. I just greatly appreciate your willingness to go forward on this conversation with Reverend Charles and I. Absolutely. And I'm not sure so much we're fumbling as we're making it up as we go. You know, we're figuring it out, right? Yeah. We're just doing what we're here to do. We're doing our best at it. And I appreciate that. And that's why I love, even if sometimes it does seem like we're fumbling, we're still picking. We're not afraid to pick the ball back up. Hey, fumbling, we don't lose the ball. We know where it is. We don't lose the ball. Yeah, that's right. We know where it is. The other team's not getting this ball. Right on. Well, thank you, Jeffon. A couple quick announcements for you, gang, before we wrap up this day's program.
Dr. Joe will be back with Jeffon next Tuesday, so he'll be picking up chapter 15. You'll get to see Dr. Joe and Jeffon take that ball and run it forward. As much as Dr. Joe loves those sports analogies, we all know that, don't we? Ha ha ha. Tomorrow is the Sensational Six, Dancing in the Dark. Reverend Laura, you want to tease that real quick?
Sure. Dale's put it together. It's going to be awesome because Dale always brings her A game.
Love it.
So I'm really excited, and we're going to be sharing, our dark moments and how we traveled out of that. So please come join us.
Awesome. Thank you, Reverend Laurie. Cool. So that's Sensational Six tomorrow. Dancing in the Dark is the theme. Let's see. Thursday is the first official show of Dr. Laura's weekly program called The Higher View. So tune in with Dr. Laura at 10 o'clock on Thursday, and 10 o'clock on Thursdays from here on out. It's going to be lovely. And Friday, I am so grateful to welcome Mr. Sharif Abdullah. He's going to be with me for Life on Love on Friday, and we're going to unpack some of the things we talked about today and some of the larger issues that we're facing right now. He's a brilliant man. I invite you to go Google him or look at the newsletter and the information that we've sent out. Sharif Abdullah out of Portland, Oregon, and Commonwealth Institute is going to be a brilliant conversation. I'm excited about that. Let's see. It's all good. We continue to appreciate your financial contributions to the center. Thank you so very much for all of the glorious ways that you support us financially to continue with this program and all the other things that we do. And there's a link there that you can copy and paste and donate right now. We appreciate you so much. Jeffon, my brother, have an extraordinary week. We're going to get on the golf course soon, my friend.
All right. Thank you, Rev Charles. I really appreciate it.
All right. Much love, everybody. Remember, make today best day ever. Peace and love.